This is the first ever Strategic Sales Network Roundtable. So thank you all so much for being here. We're really excited to make this happen, and you're part of what made this happen. Thank you for sharing your thoughts and ideas. We've heard so many great ideas, so many things that are, pain points right now, so many things that, we could sort of help bring together. And that's really what made this happen. So what we want this to be is a really open panel for discussion. We've had so many great questions come in already on the website. So thank you if you submitted a question. If you didn't, that's totally okay. We really want this to be a open discussion. So we've sent the ones that we already have over to Jeff, so he can sort of take a pre-look at those. But again, whatever you have on your mind, you can ask to our fantastic expert, Jeff Epstein, who is, I know this is like the Brady Bunch and everybody's is a little different, but he's actually right here on my right. So we're so thrilled to have Jeff. He's feels like such an awesome speaker and leader for this conversation. We're really thrilled to have him on board. Jeff is currently an operating partner at Bessemer Venture Partners, where he leads Bessemer CFO Council. He is the former executive vice president and CFO for Oracle. He has also served in additional CFO roles at several other public and private companies, including DoubleClick, which was acquired by Google, King World Productions, and Nielsen's Media Measurement and Information Group. His specialties are in B2B software, marketplaces, and AI software. Jeff also serves as an educator at Stanford. He teaches the CFO leadership class at the Stanford Graduate School of Business, as well as co-teaching the Lean Launchpad class within the Graduate School of Engineering. He also serves on numerous boards of directors. So with that, I will go ahead and kick it over to Jeff. Jeff, thank you so much for being here today.
Lee, well, thank you very much for inviting me. It's a pleasure to see everyone. Just a word on the boards. I serve on the board of Twilio, Okta, Kaiser Permanente, the large nonprofit health plan, and Databook. So very excited to be a board member of Databook. I'll just talk for a couple of minutes about my perception of the CFO role in the purchase cycle. And it may be a little controversial and may not be what you want to hear, but I'll tell you from my point of view. If someone comes to me in my CFO, I was CFO for 25 years, but I for the last 10 years, I've been retired as a CFO and I've been a part-time operating partner at Bessemer. But when I was a CFO, when people came to me and said, we want to spend $1 million on this new software, we think it's great, please give us the budget for it, I would want to see a 10-to-1 return, meaning I would want to see $10 million of annual savings for $1 million cost. And the reason is, if you have something that says you're going to save $10 million, I don't believe it. So I figure it's, okay, you're saying 10 million, it's probably 5 million. And if it only saved me $1 million, I'm not going to spend $1 million to save $1 million. So I have to have at least sort of a 2-to-1 return. But there are probably other projects that have a 3-to-1 return or 4-to-1 return. So for you to get to the top of the list, it has to be realistically 5-to-1. And therefore, since I'm haircutting it, sort of I have to have the believability that it could even be 10-to-1. When I was at Oracle, I had a list of 350 IT projects, which we wanted to do. And we rated each one in terms of what we thought the value would be, in terms of how many millions of dollars a year we'd save or the benefit, and what the cost would be roughly in terms of man months or people months of development time for engineering. And we then tried to rank order them on which projects had a 10-to-1 return, which had a 2-to-1 return. The ones that were strategically important or had 10-to-1 return, we would do first. And we never got to project number 50. So we had 350 projects. We would do number 1, 2, 3. By the time we got to number 40, there were another 30 projects that were ahead of it. And we never got to 50, let alone 100 or 200 or 300. So if you can only justify a 2-to-1 return, you're going to be, project number 175, and we're just never going to get to it. Even though it'd be nice to have, it's just not going to make the priority list. So sorry about the bad news, but that's how I looked at it. When it made the priority list, of course, there were other things where there were ways to get around the list. One is it's a legal requirement. We have to comply with privacy requirements in Europe, so you just have to do it. There's no ROI. Or Larry Ellison says you have to do it, so then you have to do it. So there are other ways to get around the list, but I would say 80% of our projects were through this prioritization process. Once you're in the top priority list and we want to get it done, then we look for case studies. We say, okay, this is very interesting. Maybe it works. Give me references of 3 people who have used it successfully. I want to call them and talk to them about it. And I want to see the case studies. How much did they spend? How much additional cost besides the cost of the software? What was the cost of implementing it, maintaining it, training? So when I do the 10-to-1, I have to look at the total costs there. And then I want to, feel that the people I reach out to are people who highly recommend it. And we usually will take a couple of references from the vendor, and then we will call people on our own who the vendor didn't give us, because the vendor is obviously going to give us biased answers, and we want to reach people randomly out there and see who likes it or doesn't. And we'll read Gartner or other things, or just go online and read comments and try to find people who've used it, and maybe people who haven't been successful with it. If someone hasn't been successful, it doesn't mean we won't buy the product. It means that we'll ask a lot more questions. Why weren't they successful, and how do we avoid being there? There's also a question of when you buy a product, do you roll it out to everybody all at once, or do you try it for a subset? Do you try it just in one country or one region or one team before you roll it out? And typically we would try it out. It's not a trial. Like a 30-day trial is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about we would roll it out, but we'd only roll it out to a subset of the future users, and then get feedback on how they were using it. Another question we'd ask is time to value. How long does it take to implement? Once it's implemented, how long does time take to get our value? And then we would think about segments. So is this something that every employee at our company can use, or every salesperson could use, or every finance person, or is it only relevant to some teams? Is it only for US as opposed to international teams? Is it only for some subsets? So we try to think carefully about which segments we get the highest value. And then when people come to us, when an operating person would come to me and say, I'd like a budget for $1 million to do this, my first reaction is, well, I tell you, why don't I give you a story for the Larry Ellison story, which is Thomas Kurian, who today runs Google Cloud, ran software engineering when I was the CFO of Oracle. And I was at a meeting with Larry and Thomas, where Larry said, look, I want you to do this new project. And Thomas came back and said, no problem, it's going to cost us $50 million, which for Oracle with 30 billion in revenue wasn't a huge amount of money. And so Thomas says, give me $50 million budget, I'll do it. And Larry says, Thomas, you have a $3 billion annual budget, find the $50 million. So Larry's attitude was, I'm not going to give you more money. You have to reprioritize what you're already doing. And this is now a top priority. Stop doing something else. And that's basically my attitude as a CFO, is if someone comes to me and says, I need $1 million for something, my first reaction is, great, you can spend the money on this. Where are you going to cut $1 million somewhere else? Because I'm not giving you a bigger overall budget. Whether it's headcount or other software or some other efficiency savings. So that's my initial overview. I'm happy to turn it over to questions. And what I recommend is, why don't we all come off mute? Imagine we're all in a room together in real life. We would have a conversation. People would interrupt each other, talk over each other. It's just, I think that's much better than raising your hand.
Yeah, 100%. And then so floor's open for questions. As you ask your question, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself, just so we all know who everybody is. Anybody want to go first?
Oh, shoot, I guess I'll go first. Why not? Anyway, Jeff, great insight. Especially, I think a lot of us from a sales perspective like to, target the C-suite, have that conversation, understand some of the strategic initiatives and things of that nature. However, I think your last comment that you made is, if you're looking for, budget for $1 million, your first pushback is, what you have it, you just need to find it, right? What other efficiency gains? So that's a very interesting view, and I kind of makes me rethink a few things for sure. But the question I have is, we talk a lot about corporate metrics, and what is the company trying to achieve, whether it's increase of revenue, increase EBITDA, lower OpEx. I believe that there's a standard set of maybe 3 that apply to almost any enterprise that's out there. So I was just curious if you can comment on what do you think those 3 common, or maybe there's 2, what those would be. And then the follow-up to that is, in your experience, knowing that you have these metrics that are set, let's just say for argument's sake, increase revenue by X%. Does every line of business, meaning, sales is obvious, but marketing, prod dev, customer success, etc., do they all understand what their contribution is to achieving those metrics, in your opinion? So I'll stop there. And by the way, I'm Greg Nishi here.
Great. And Greg, what firm are you with?
With Anaplan.
Okay, terrific. Well, the answer to your last question, in many cases, they don't understand, but I think they should. In an ideal world, they should understand how they help contribute to those metrics. The 2 typical metrics you start with are revenue growth and profitability, and you combine them into what's called the rule of 40, you might have heard of. So Oracle, for instance, has essentially 0 revenue growth and a 40% profit margin. So if you add your revenue growth to your profit margin, they're at 40. There are other companies that are growing at 40% a year and are break even. So they're also at 40. There are companies that are growing at 20% and have a 20% margin. They're at 40. But if you're growing at 20% and you're losing, you have a minus 10% margin, then you're only at a 10. You're not at the rule of 40. So you want to be at that efficient frontier where your combination of your revenue growth plus your profitability, the top, let's say top quartile companies are going to be at 40 or above. The next level down metrics are also very important. So for instance, a key metric for me is sales efficiency. So if I spend $1 on sales and marketing, how long does it take me to make that $1 back in terms of profit contribution? Does it take me a year, 2 years, 3 years? And when we look at it at Bessemer, we look for a minimum of 2 years. So to use a bigger number, let's say I'm spending $10 million a year on sales and marketing. Do I generate $5 million a year of operating income contribution before spending money on R&D and G&A? Just do I, on the revenue I bring in, do I bring in $5 million of revenue, which pays back my sales and marketing costs in 2 years, which to me would be a minimum. If it pays back in more than 2 years, then I'm not happy. Another metric would be for G&A efficiency. If you could look at the 3 big cost lines, if you look at someone's income statement, for software companies, there's R&D, G&A, and sales and marketing. And you could look at what those are as a percentage of revenue for you, and you could look at what those are as a percentage of revenue for your peer group, or where you want to be in a few years. And you can see, is my R&D as a percentage of revenue where I want it to be? So I think at Oracle, we were at 14% of revenue, as an example, which we were happy with. We didn't want to spend less because we didn't want to underinvest in R&D. But there are many companies that are spending 30% of revenue on R&D, and it's not sustainable if they want to have high profit margins. So the question is, how do they improve their R&D cost effectiveness? And same thing with G&A as well. You asked a lot of questions, Greg. Did I get to all of them? Or?
I did. No, it was great. My background, just so is mostly selling to IT, and it's what I find some interesting things versus Anaplan, more or less selling to the business, if you will. That often people are, I call it developing in a vacuum. IT thinks they know what the business wants, and they go out, find a technology, they build it, and then they roll it out, and they don't include the business in the evaluation. They don't, in the development of the solution, and they roll it out. And next thing you know, you get a call from the CIO saying, "Hey, your product sucks. Nobody's using it." And so kind of changed my approach into, anytime I engage with, someone, okay, like back in the day with IT, who's your trusted business advisor? Who from the business is going to help you, gain adoption and use the technology and talk amongst their peers?
Well, yeah, my experience is different, that within the functions, there are business people whose job it is to make their functions more efficient and effective. And software is an important part of that. So on my team within finance at Oracle, I had a team of 50 global process owners, and they were responsible not only for improving our own internal process, but when we made an acquisition, they were responsible for taking the acquired company's process and moving it onto ours. So someone was in charge of the sales compensation process, and someone was in charge of the general ledger process. And when we bought a company, whatever they were using, we throw it out, we put them on Oracle Financials, and that global process owner would own that, and they would work with IT to they essentially be the client. We had 100 people in IT supporting finance, and the global process owner team would be the client of the IT department. The IT department would basically be working for us in a way as if we were hired at Deloitte or Accenture. And in sales, what I've typically, the sales ops team plays that role. So and there might be a marketing ops team. So there's a sales ops team that's in charge of Salesforce and all the other sales tools and training and adoption and improving things. And they'd be looking at products like Databook and figuring out how to make the sales team more effective and efficient. And if IT is running that process as opposed to the sales ops team, then I agree with you. It's not going to be a good outcome.
Yeah, that actually kind of touches another topic I was going to bring up, which is how do you see the relationship between the business and IT evolving? I think it's trending in the right direction, but from another lens, through your lens, just curious, do you see that relationship, becoming a lot tighter, or has it changed at all?
I haven't seen it change. I think there's always a balance. So that the business wants products that have a great UI and that they really like, and IT want products that are, if it's either cloud or an on-premise product, they have to do a lot of work behind the scenes. So they want it to be secure, and they want it to be interoperable with the other products, and they don't care as much about the UI because they don't use the UI. And so often you find products, there might be a product with a great UI, but not very effective in terms of integration, versus one that's really integrated in a suite, but not a great UI. And then there's a conflict between IT and the business. And Oracle famously had, the IT department loved Oracle because it was standardized on Oracle and made everything easy. And the Oracle products were not easy to use. And so there was that's why Anaplan wins share against Hyperion, right? Because you're more easier to use from a user point of view.
Yeah, cool. Thank you.
Kate, you want to jump in?
Yeah,
Like,
sorry, I'm not on video. I'm actually driving. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah,
yes.
all good.
Okay, perfect. You guys often catch me when I'm commuting, but Jeff, my name's Kate Higgins. I am an AE at Salonis, and I'm curious to know, when you're looking at total cost of ownership, how many years out are you planning that? Are you looking for?
Well, it's usually, if it's going to be a software product on an annual contract, it's usually what am I spending every year, which doesn't change, and then what my benefits are, and the benefits start slow and end up going out, and so they reach us. I typically by the second or third year you're at full benefit, and so I just look at the steady state. I don't look at sort of a 5-year life or a 10-year life and then discount it back. I'll just say it might take us a year or two to get up to speed. Once the third year we're at steady state, I'm spending $1 million a year, I'm saving $10 million a year, and life is great. If I had to pay up front for an on-premise product where I pay a license and then support, then I would look at the total cost of ownership, because I'd have to amortize the upfront payment over time. But I probably would take a rule of thumb: if I'm paying $10 million for an upfront license, which is a perpetual license, I might say, well, yeah, it's a perpetual license, but it realistically has, let's say, a 20-year life for Oracle Financials. So I'll just take $10 million divided by 20 years and say it's equivalent to $500,000 a year, and then translate that into an annual number.
And including all of the services with that as well.
Yeah, I have found that saying I'm paying a lot up front and then I'm getting benefits over time is not an easy way for people to think about it. What I try to do is I try to turn everything into an annual revenue and an annual cost or an annual benefit. And so if there's a
Yep.
one-time $10 million cost, I'll divide that by the number of years and turn that into an annual cost. And then just I'll have an annual,
Got it.
a standard annual cost, annual benefit. And I'm not concerned about precision. It's, these numbers are so hard to estimate that if you're within 30%, you're fine.
Yeah.
No one can analyze it to the nearest percent.
You mentioned
Thank you.
You mentioned a couple things. So first of all, you mentioned a pretty intense level of scrutiny on new purchases, and you used kind of the, if I'm going to spend $1 million, I want to see 10 million back. Is there a threshold at which you as a CFO are paying extra attention? I realize it's probably subjective based on the company size, et cetera, but is there, kind of a threshold at which you're willing to put your time and energy into that level of scrutiny versus letting something sort of fall under the radar?
Every company has approval limits. So where a vice president can spend $100,000, and over that, the CFO spends 500,000 and the CEO is $1 million, or it could be at Oracle, it might be the CFO could spend 100 million without the CEO's approval. So depending on the size of the company, and you could ask, everyone in the company knows what those numbers are. So you could just ask your customer, what is your personal approval level? What's the approval level of your boss? How much do I need before it goes to the CFO? Now, it may need to go to procurement to get approval for the contract and things like that, but that's different from going to the CFO. And 90% of the time, by the time it goes to the CFO, if business is normal, someone who works for the CFO in a financial planning or budgeting department is working with the team, with the IT team and the business team to put together the business case. And the junior person won't go ahead with it unless they think the CFO will approve. So by the time it gets to the CFO will approve it 90% of the time, unless there's a major transition, like we're laying off 10% of our employees next month and we're holding all the costs. And so I'm basically I'm not going to approve anything for the next month until we see where things settle. So sometimes you run into things like that.
Okay, but thank you. Also, I didn't introduce myself. I'm Alex Bullard. I'm an enterprise account executive. I sell analytics at Salesforce. I've been doing enterprise sales for roughly 10 years. And in that time, I've seen a lot of case studies with a lot of numbers thrown out there. And you mentioned that one of the things that you do is you go and refer to other case studies and you'll call up customers and ask them for their ROI. And let's face it, a lot of people are trying to justify their spend. And some of those numbers might be a little soft at times. What numbers do you trust, and how do you kind of discern between what's real ROI versus marketing ROI?
Well, reducing costs is usually pretty easy to measure. Increasing revenue is hard to measure. And so, but increasing revenue is more valuable. And so the answer is there's no way to analyze it. It's just a question of judgment. Fundamentally, I'll call up someone and say, did this product in fact help you increase your revenue? And would you buy it? Are you happy you bought it? Would you buy it again? And so at the end of the day, I'm less focused on the analysis. I'm more focused on the endorsement of someone I trust.
All right, thanks.
Ran, you've asked two questions, ROI versus impact, which I think is a related type of thing. Some of it's quantifiable and some of it's not quantifiable. When you say impact, I'll give you an example. There was a product Oracle sold to a bank in Australia, which improved it was approving mortgages in a month. It took them a month to approve mortgages. And if they bought the Oracle product, they could approve it in a day. And that's a lot of impact. So now you could make an argument, well, we're going to double the number of mortgages based on this, but who knows? But you just had a sense that if you could go from a month approval process to a day approval process, it's going to be big.
Right.
So the ROI analysis wasn't important. It was the impact that was important.
So how would that, so thank you for that. And how would that factor into your, hey, I'm going to start with a 10-to-1, give it a 50% haircut, and it's got to bubble to the top 50. You kind of, the ROI may be more limited, but you kind of know it's there.
Well, no, if you're going to double the number of mortgages, the ROI is going to be huge.
Sure.
And whether it doubles the number of mortgages or increases the number of mortgages by 20% or 30%, it's still going to be huge. And so we would come up with some number on what we thought the revenue impact would be. It would be a pure guess, and it would be the top of the list if it were that dramatic.
And as far as percentages of, because ROI is a percentage versus kind of total impact, right? Both two projects can have the same ROI, but one will translate into $1 million in impact and the other will be $10 million.
Well, if they both have, if I'm spending $1 million to make 10 million, or I'm spending 10 million to make 100 million, in both cases, I'm making 10 to 1. Obviously, the bigger, I would try to be the bigger one first if they were equally hard to do. Probably the smaller one is easier to do. So maybe I'd do the easier one first because it would get done. The harder one might take 5 years to do. But so it's a dollar value return and a multiple return. And there's no right answer. It's a judgment call. And fundamentally, the point is, I, as the CFO, I always have more projects than I will do. There are always more projects that people want than I will. And so I have to have some way of prioritizing them. And at the end of the day, you come up with some math and some numbers, but you use a lot of judgment in saying, is this above average, average, or below average in terms of the impact and the ROI?
Okay. I'll just introduce.
I'm afraid I had just scheduled till 9:30, so I have another commitment now. But this has been fascinating. And my email is jeff@bvp.com, and the Databook people can circulate that. I'm happy to follow up with one-on-one calls or emails. And it's a pleasure meeting everybody, and would love to keep in touch.
Jeff, I appreciate the time. This is great. So thank you
very much. Yeah.
Very good.
Jeff.
Great.
Thank you,
Really
Jeff.
interesting.
See
Thank
everybody.
you.
Take care.
Thank you all as well. So we'll let anybody that needs to hop off can hop off, but we'll do a quick thank you to everybody who joined in today. I put Jeff's email in the chat, and we'll send that out to y'all as well and get that in the community, as well as have a space for any follow-up questions there that we can continue to pass over to Jeff. So thank you all for joining, for coming with great questions, for asking those questions. And that's pretty much it. Hope y'all have a wonderful rest of your Wednesday.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, y'all.
for setting it up.
Thank you.
Everybody.